Tonight, I'm going to be talking about taking control of your APIs with Azure API Management. So when APIs go wild, APIs are everywhere. You know, we're fans of microservices and even nano services these days. So they're everywhere, and there's even an API economy. The world is, the tech world is built on APIs now. But there's a huge mixture of technologies. You know, you'll have things written in .NET, you'll have a backend in Node.js, you'll have Golang applications. When it comes to security even, the way that you will secure your applications in these different technologies are all different. So the problems are just building up and up, you know. So, and even when it comes to the development side of things, documentation for APIs is often missing, or it's just hard to find, or completely just, no good, not useful at all. And all of this added up together, we lose that agility and the control of what we want when developing our software. Being agile and microservices are a lot of promises for increasing your agility, but in practice, and a lot of recent feedback I've had is that agility has dropped a fair bit. So what are we going to do about this now? One day, if you don't take care of it, you'll drop the ball. You have a very sad day, like this poor fellow over here. You don't want to be walking around with a face like that after your most recent deployment. So I'm going to look at what is Azure API Management, pick my top features, why I consider it to be the solution to all those problems. I'm going to run through a really cool live demo and cover some of the things that I found personally a little bit painful, but also how to remedy that pain, and a few sort of special considerations at the end. So my name is William Liebenberg. I'm a solution architect here at SSW in Melbourne. You can find me on Twitter. I've also got a blog site called Azure Gems. You can find me on LinkedIn for a little bit more of a formal engagement. And a little bit about myself. I started coding when I was about 5 years old, using BASIC, very old language, on a Spectre Video 328. It was all nice and beige, even the keys, that's going back a fair while. So we didn't have hard drives or CD-ROMs back then, long before the internet, so everything was loaded from cassette tapes. But that was a great childhood, and the games on that was epic. And I still play some of them today because there's a really cool ZX Spectrum emulator written in Blazor, which is also one of my favorite techs recently. So you can find that online. It's pretty cool. Then I started developing professionally around 2004, mainly in C and C++, doing 3D graphics and real-time simulations, training simulators for heavy industry to make sure people were trained properly so they can work safely in their environment. And then .NET came along, and I jumped on that on version 2. I didn't think, version 1, what's this crazy new tech? I was a bit hesitant, but then, I got hooked, and I've been using .NET ever since. And then in 2014, I started working with Azure, and pretty much a day doesn't go by where I don't do something in Azure at work or even at home. So what is Azure API Management? So for me, it is the one place that I want to go to publish my APIs, when I want to add my custom security and also then analyze the performance and the usage of my APIs. So you can bring your own Swagger definition or an open API spec, or even something, an old WSDL definition for your old SOAP services, and everything still works in XML. Or you can even start from scratch. You can build an API spec inside of Azure API Management. But essentially, it's you put a facade in front of all your backend APIs that it's only one endpoint that you have to hit. You hit that one IP or the domain, and you are not concerned of what's behind it. There could be 10 different services behind that API management gateway. You don't need to care about it. You wouldn't even know what's there. So it actually makes development quite easy, because if you want to swap out a backend service, the consumers wouldn't have any idea about it, and sort of already gives you 1 point for that agility that we're trying to solve. Now, API management is one of the more premium services in Azure, so it's a beast. It takes quite a long time to spin this up, at least half an hour to wait before it is ready to use. But it suits a lot of business cases. It can even work on-prem. It can help you go multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, so you have on-prem and cloud services running, and your API is available to the world to use. So, you can run any backend. If it's a Logic app or a Kubernetes cluster, they're all used via Azure API management. So my top features is the API gateway, the developer portal, really cool. The policies that we can use and sort of write ourselves to customize the security and do some cool things to the traffic that comes in and out of our gateway. Security and the API analytics. So these are my top features for picking Azure API management. So if you did go to Azure and want to create an API, you see something like this where you can create it from a definition or import it from an existing Azure resource, or you can go and create a blank one from scratch. But it's a bit hard to see this screen. I'm going to jump into API management very soon. So don't worry about if you can't see that too clearly. But if you take a step back and look at the API gateway, which is sort of at the heart of Azure API management, this is what you how you can visualize it. A request can come in from the left there. It hits the front end of API management, and that inbound traffic goes through the inbound processing pipeline. And this is where we can apply some policies before it hits one of the backend services. So you can do things like add or remove headers. You can check for JWT tokens. You can validate the tokens. You can do custom authentication, caching, quotas. There's a whole lot of stuff that you can add in there quite easily. And then hits the back end. It can be forwarded to any of your services. Like I said, it doesn't matter what it is. As long as it goes via REST, you'll be fine. So Logic apps, Azure Functions and App Service, Kubernetes cluster, it doesn't really matter. Then when the response comes back from your backend, again, you can process it in the outbound step. You can do some crazy stuff here to make sure that no sensitive data or information is sent out to the public. It's kind of cool. You could, for instance, if a backend service transmits XML, you can transform that into JSON. Make it a bit more modern and align that with everything that everyone else does these days. And so a whole lot of power. Now, the developer portal, when you go there, I'll show you shortly, you'll see a list of APIs that is in your catalog, and it comes with all the documentation. It's all automatically generated for you from that Swagger definitions or open API specs. And as a publisher, this is where I would go to manage who has access to my APIs or which products inside of the API management they can use and how much they can use of it. So you can actually put usage quotas and a whole bunch of rate limits and things on there as well. And then it also lets me sort of test the APIs, not just as a publisher, but as a developer or a consumer of these APIs. So I can go to this dev portal, browse through the APIs, hit the try it button, and essentially it's like Postman in the browser. So it's very, very useful. And again, as a consumer, I can have usage reports for myself. So I can see exactly how much of this particular API or set of APIs I've used. And for a publisher, you have very much the same thing, but just at a much wider scope across everyone using your APIs. And it's also self-service. So this means if I, as a publisher, make some products available, the consumers can come to my portal and they can just subscribe to it. I don't really have to do anything. It's all sort of automatically generated, made available, and they can subscribe to whichever one they need. I can even gift someone a subscription if I wanted to, if you're from the publishing side. But I think part of the idea is that you have your developer portal, and with all the usage stats and things, you can monetize your APIs. That's a very important story these days as well. So recently, we did a survey at work, and we're talking about branding your API using Azure API management, and then how important is this branding so that you take this portal and customize it to just make it yours, to own it properly and make your brand stand out. And the feedback is really cool. We had a good rating of above 4, average rating of just above 4, which is nice. And the feedback is that, do you think that a branded developer portal that comes with Azure API management is a useful feature? And pretty much everyone who's a developer said yes. I don't know who those 3 people are, but there's a very small number there, so that's fine. I think this for me says that developer portal is very important. People actually like to use it. I certainly do, and I'll show you what I've done with it. When it comes to security, API management actually makes it really easy for me to secure apps that are not secure without actually adding any code to these apps. So the apps are completely unchanged. And that's a great win for some old apps that you want to add some modern security to. And it's very nice and straightforward. So I could, for instance, add an identity server in front of that and making sure that the tokens are validated before it even hits that backend service from 10 years ago. So and then this allows us, with all these APIs and mixtures of technologies that we have, we can enforce some security across all of them in one place. Whatever scheme you like to use, you can ensure that the inbound requests have a particular key or a token. You can make sure it comes just from a particular IPs or a client certificate that you've issued to some of your users. Now, of course, the list doesn't end there. There's quite a lot more you can do with security in API management. The policies, like I mentioned earlier, they are applied to the inbound, outbound, and actually back-end operations, all going through the API gateway. Now, they're written in XML, and you can actually mix C#7 into this XML and even make use of .NET Framework. Now, C.NET Framework, hopefully one day soon they can update that for something a bit more modern, but it certainly gives you a huge amount of power to write some transformations and some really dynamic policies in Azure API management. So it is very useful. Now, these policies, you can take them and apply that to an individual operation, like a single request in your API. It can do something specific. Or you can apply a single policy, for instance, let's say caching, to a whole API in one go. Or even a product, or even a whole global policy. So you can apply to absolutely everything. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. Now, this is what one of the policies might look like. So see, it is XML, and there's just a small hint of the .NET framework, the C#7 code here, where I'm accessing the context. So there's an API management policy context that you can access and read some variables out of there. There's a whole lot of stuff that you can do. And there's actually, for most part, the Microsoft Docs for API management is really good. It's just there's quite a lot, and it will take you time to go through there. But I think it's probably one of the better set of docs out there once you get started. Finally, API analytics for me is super, super important. So this, I love DevOps. Got to always make sure that I'm monitoring my systems, and not just for their performance or their health, but the usage as well. Because these days, that is a very key part of monetizing your API. You need to know how much to charge your users, and also then you can see if someone's overusing it. You could maybe bump them up a tier, or make that recommendation to them. It all becomes very, very useful. And along with that is monitoring. So App Insights is wired into API management directly. It's really cool. So all the things that we are used to, seeing like the application map, the live metrics, and all the performance and telemetry queries, all of the stuff we want is available. And it is actually really, really useful. So I'll show you a demo of that soon, actually right now. So to start off with, I have a Azure Function application here. It's just like every good developer out there, you have your own weather application to test out things. And this has simply just got two endpoints to get a weekly and a daily forecast from our BOM service, BOM, Bureau of Meteorology. And there's an API there. So I've just made use of their API. And I've already published this app to Azure. So here it is. So it's an Azure Functions app, but I'm serving a Swagger page, which for some of you, if you don't know, there's a really cool extension. It's called Azure Functions Open API extension. If you install that, and I'll just go back here and show you real quickly. There's the NuGet package here, Azure Web Jobs Extensions Open API. So it's still in preview, but it is working really, really well. It's really very useful to do that for Azure Functions. Normally, it's very easy for web APIs to serve a Swagger page, but now they've made it just as easy for your Azure Functions apps. Okay, so all you need to do, you bring in that NuGet package, and there's a number of attributes that you can add to your HTTP endpoints to describe the operation, the parameters, and the responses. And there's a few more that you can add, but for me, this is all I needed. And when the page finally renders, this is the Swagger page that we're very familiar with. You can click on the operation here. I'll just make sure zoom in a bit. We can see here I've got my parameters for the location, so the name or a postcode of where I want the forecast to be. So I want to just try that out, and I'll put in a request for Melbourne. Execute and make sure this API works. Yep. And here we go. So I've got a response for the week's weather, and you can scroll down. It's a pretty detailed payload, all the things that we are used to seeing. But also just here's a description of the model as well. So if before we even got to execute it, I'll try with the next one. We can see here that part of the Swagger spec or the documentation that we get is that it shows you the shape of the model and all the other models that are actually available in this application. So you can actually use these to build your integrations with this API. Most likely you'll bolt this into a front-end application, and you need to know the shape of the data, and this will definitely be useful for you to use. So now moving on to the Azure portal, where I've already got an API management instance deployed. Like I said earlier, it takes a long time to provision, so I've already got one pre-made here. So once you hit the create button, go make a coffee. It would be a nice idea if Azure had a barista service that can just like send you a coffee while you wait. But definitely will be there for a while waiting for this monster to spin up. So I'm going to jump around and show you a few things in here, and make sure that's nice and clear. Like usual, we've got the Essentials tab here. We've got links to our developer portal, our gateway URL, and the public IP of our gateway. So the very first, and probably one of the more important parts of Azure API management, collapse that, is here in the API section, where I can go and create a blank API, or I can then import them from a definition, the Swagger definition, Open API. Here's the old WSDL SOAP APIs, or I can just import it directly from an existing resource. You can see Azure Function here, but I showed you that other extension for a reason, because I can actually have a lot more rich documentation importing it directly from the function app itself. So for me, that extension is a bit of a win over this one. If I use this one, it's just very basic information about the endpoints that are available. You don't get the shapes of the models or anything of that nature. So I definitely prefer the other one. Then I'll come back to the screen in a moment, but just to show you the rest of the things out there, we've also got products. So I can go and set up different products for different types of users, different groups. You can give them different, give access to different groups. So I've got my starter packs for admins, developers, and guests. So I can have some free APIs just to entice people to try something out. Or I have an unlimited pack that is available to the admins and developers. And like I said earlier, if I go to one of these products, I can actually go, I can see which APIs are available. This one hasn't got any just yet, but I can go and apply one of these XML policies to this whole product. So if this one's unlimited, so you don't really want to put rate limits and things on here, but you will come back later and maybe do some, add some security to this one. So if I just step back, we can see what else we have. So subscriptions, again, is where once we've published an API, you need to have a subscription key to that API or to that product. And so you can see also here, who the users of the subscriptions are, and whether or not they allow for tracing, so you can debug the API calls a bit deeper. And but this screen is almost a bit self-managing once the developer portal is up and running. There's a few more things like named values, so you can add in some variables that hold values. So just sort of like you can add secrets as well if you don't want to. And this is for referencing a value or a secret in the XML policies. You don't want to actually hard code a secret, right? We know that's bad, but you want to reference it from this sort of named value store. So you can add in a plain text value or a secret, or even read it from Key Vault, which is really, really useful. But I already got one in here that I'll use a little bit later for one of the security demos. And next up is the dev portal, or the developer portal. Now, I've already published mine, but when you first open up Azure API Management, there's a little button here that says publish your portal, because it hasn't been made available yet. And once you make changes to it, you also then have to come back here and republish it. And it's actually very quick. It takes a few seconds, and it's usually all done. A few more options. You can enable CORS. Everyone loves CORS. And then you can also go and enable Azure AD. But that's not the only choice. You can add AD B2C, and even delegate to a whole bunch of other providers out there that you want to use. You can see who your subscribers are to your products or to your portal. And this one is fresh off the pipeline, so there's not many subscribers yet. But there's a whole bunch of stuff here. We can go through groups. You can set up groups of users and different identity providers. So out of the box, it gets just a basic username and password. Most people wouldn't really appreciate that. They might want to use something like B2C, so you can bring in an existing user base. Or you can go a bit further and you can use OAuth 2 or OpenID Connect. If you're using Identity Server, you can add that in here and have everyone authenticate against your identity server that you manage. You don't have to rely on something like Azure AD B2C. Or you can even add in OpenID Connect for Google, Facebook, whatever you feel like. All the options are available to you there. Then finally, we can come up to the analytics, which this is very, you'll spend a bit of time in here to check on your APIs and see what's happening. So I might put in, we had a couple of heavy bits of traffic yesterday. So we had about 248,000 requests hitting this instance, and that was on purpose. We tried to sort of load test it and see if we can have a DDoS attack on this API management instance, and it didn't work. API management just said, yep, I'm all good. It kept functioning, not a problem. So you can scroll down, you can see all the bit more information about the data amounts and the different types of requests, the response times, cache hits and cache misses, which is really cool, very important as well, to know if your caching strategy is actually paying off. And just sort of a more rich telemetry that you sort of might be used to seeing from App Insights or even something like Google Analytics. You can see where your traffic's coming from in different parts of the world, the usage for each of the different APIs, and the individual operations, the timings available associated with that, and just it breaks down everything to you more and more, and even down to the raw requests. You can see here all the requests that have come in, and you can do some analytics on that yourself. Then finally, App Insights. It's already wired in, so if you haven't seen App Insights yet, here'll be a quick little peek into it. So shouldn't go too quick. I'll start right at the beginning here. We can see just some basic info about App Insights, but if I turn this on to a little bit longer view, we can see the failed requests that have come into the system. Depending on what time frame you choose, you can see your response times and the actual number of requests that were successful or in total. And well, I didn't set up any availability tests, but it's been up and running the whole time. One of my favorite features is the application map. So when you've added, let me just choose a little bit longer time. So when you've added your backend services, they would all show up in here as well, and which is very useful. So you can sort of zoom in and look at a particular backend and inspect the traffic. It'll tell you if there's any issues with this connection, what the sort of top error was in that time frame, percentage-wise of the overall calls that were made, etc. So after a while, this application map with a lot of services becomes very, very useful. And you can dig further into each and every single request if you wanted to. Live metrics, we'll see once we hit some of our APIs, all that traffic is logged through here. It shows up in real time, just like we used to. And it's App Insights as we know it. And it is very, very cool. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the developer portal. So there's two ways of accessing this dev portal. One, I can access it as an administrator, where I can go and customize the dev portal. And secondly, I can access it as a user or a consumer. So I'm just going to open this up. You see there's a single sign on. So this should take me in as the administrator. So I can go and customize my awesome developer portal. So give it a moment to load. You can see there's already a couple of things up here. And, you know, there's all those little widgets and stuff flying around. So what is going on? Well, this is a nice sort of a website builder that you can use for your whole developer portal. You don't actually have to code it up yourself at all. I find this is super, super useful. You know, you can add a whole bunch of content, you know, brand it, make it your own, you know, add buttons to sign up, for people to explore your APIs, link them off to other things. You know, whatever you need to put in here, you can definitely do it. This is very, very nice and simple. So for instance, if there's this styles button, right? So I can go and do a full styling on everything that's available in this portal. You know, the color schemes, and gradients, the shadows, it's all here. You can go and definitely get your designers onto making this look super, super awesome. And you know, there's all the different settings. There's the different navigation options you can have to put on the top of your homepage. So I'm just going to quickly reload, go back to the homepage. So these navigation options. So whatever you need to put here, you can do that. Different layouts you can build, different images you can use for the backgrounds. And like, you know, we just quickly go to see here. Click here. I can change the image. I can put in something a bit different. How about, oh, it's hard to choose. Let's pick that one. There we go. And I can then save that change. And I can actually publish it directly from here. I don't have to go back to Azure Portal. I can just click here, publish, and it will take a moment for it to be published. And then we can go back and check it out as an actual user. So I'm just going to open this up in a new window. Open that new private window. We'll see here what it looks like as a consumer. All right, so here we go. Now I've already signed myself up, so I can just go and sign in. But you know, there's a sign up button here. You click on that. It'll take us to the sign up page. You can put in your email address, you know, user and password. Do the sort of tricky capture there, and you know, you'll sign up. API management will send you an email for validation, for confirmation. You click on that, and you're in. I'm just going to go to sign in real quick. You can see here I've already configured Azure AD B2C, so I can sign in with that username and password, or any of the other providers that I've hooked up to my my portal. So I'm just going to sign up here, or sign in quickly with my account that I've already created. And now we can go and see, hey, here's the APIs that I have. And you know, when you click on them, you can see here, here's all the operations that is available for this. There's some cool, excuse me, some documentation. Yeah, it's all nice and snappy. We can see here the parameters that goes in for this particular request or operation. I can click try it. You know, I can add whatever values in here and see what happens when I press send. So it sends it, get a HTTP response and everything that comes with it. Now this one's just an Echo API and it's not returning anything useful, so we're going to do something about that shortly. But what else is really cool is you get some examples from this dev portal, but how would you implement or write some code to call this API out in the real world? And it's quite nice. You can look at how to do it in Java or Python, and yeah, it's just very nice and useful. But what I want to do is also, I want to bring in that weather API that I spoke about earlier. So, you know, how I've got the, where did it go? Oh, yeah, sorry, my Swagger definition. All right, so you can see here, I've got a URL that publishes the Swagger definition. So I can take that, you can go to Azure API Management, go to APIs, and instead of creating a blank one, I want to import that from a URL. So I'll just zoom out slightly so you can see that nicely. So I can take that URL, I can paste that in here, And if you give it a sec, you'll actually see that it should pull the display names from the Swagger definition. Now that's just what it was by default. I didn't customize that, but I can do it here. So I just want to give my API a display name and sort of a real sort of programmatic name, so you can reference the API actually in the policies, which is very useful. And I want to give it a suffix as well. So you can put all sorts of cool routes and everything. You have to manage that as well to separate your APIs. And so I'm just going to go and click create. So that will take not very long. And here we have our weatherless API. So we can see again, just zoom out slightly. And let's see if I can make a bit more space. There we go. Okay, so here with all our operations, we can see where you probably spend a fair bit of time. So at the front end, there's no real details in here just yet, but we'll get to that. We'll see there's an inbound processing block, and we can actually go and add policies. And if I click on add policy, it comes up with a bunch of pre-made ones. It's very easy for you to click and use, but I'll come back to this a little bit later. I want to get this API published first, quickly consume it, and then we can see how we can customize it and make it a little bit better. So we can see here's the backend endpoint of that Azure Functions app that I already deployed. And again, we can apply policies to the outbound. So just to show, there's a few other settings in here. You can add some more descriptions about your API. This other API on the planet. There we go. So that should show up on our dev portal. You can control the scheme, HTTPS or HTTP or both. And very importantly, you can associate this with a product. So I'm going to choose the unlimited product. So only some of the top end users can actually get that. And so we also can add some extra options here for requiring a subscription. So the person who uses this must have the subscription to the unlimited product, and they must actually use a subscription key when they make a request to this API. And you can add some more stuff for OpenID and OAuth 2. So I'm just going to save that real quick. And if I go back to the API, my dev portal, so all of a sudden, here's that weatherless API. It's immediately available. And you can see here is the description we gave it. I click on it, and just like with the other APIs, we can see here is all the information we need. Here's a description of all our models, the shape, the examples, it's all here, everything we want. And so if I go and see, I want to get the weekly forecast, and click try it. And because I'm logged in and I'm a subscriber, it can automatically attach my subscription key here for me. And I just want to know what the weather is like in Brisbane. And so all I can do now is go and click send. And here we go. So get a response back. And here's the data. Here's the actual payload for the weekly forecast in Brisbane. Very cool. Very cool. But not everyone really wants to spend all their time in the dev portal. You want to start getting a bit serious. Maybe you want to run Postman or one of your other REST clients, and this lets you then download the actual OpenAPI spec for this particular API. So I'm going to download this one here. You can see it's downloaded already, nice and quick. And I'm going to use my favorite REST client here, Insomnia, and I'm just going to create a new collection from this file I downloaded. And click OK. So here's our weatherless API that we just downloaded. Again, we see the same operations that we saw in the portal. It's all nicely done, knows what the base URL is for our API. It's got some of the query strings and the headers already all set up for us. But one piece is missing. So if I just quickly go and manage my environment, I need to actually supply my subscription key. Where do I get that from? So as a consumer of the dev portal, I can go to my profile and see a whole bunch of stuff here. We can change my name and password, all that kind of stuff. And then I can show my subscription key. So if I'm subscribed to the unlimited product, I'm going to grab this key. I'm just going to quickly put that in here and click done. So now if I send that, I should get, oh, internal server error. I know exactly why that happened, because only valid postcodes and suburb names are allowed. So let's try for Sydney this time. Here we go. I'm going to click send. Cool, that works straight away. It's nice and snappy. You can see there, it's varying a little bit up and down in terms of the response time, but that's cool. So I can go, like most developers will sit there and click, and throw requests through the internet just to, I don't know, test the API and make sure it's very nice and performant. But for me as a publisher, I don't really want people just hitting my API for no reason. And this is where I might want to put up some rate limits and usage quotas. So how do I do that? So go back to the API management portal, and I can apply this directly just to this API or to the whole product. But I want to do it for just this API, just to show you that I can make this work for one operation and one operation only. So I want to go here and click Add Policy for the daily forecast. And what I want to do, I will put on the cache responses. Okay, and here, very nice and easy little UI. It says, what duration do you want for this cache? So just for demo purposes, I might put 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds, it will invalidate the cache, make a call to the actual backend API, and return that data for me. So you can see here it's added the cache lookup policy, and it's also had the cache store policy. Now, one is on the inbound, so it goes and looks up the cache. Is there cache? Cool. Return that. If there's not, then make a request to the backend, and on the way out, make sure we store it in cache. So what does this code actually look like? So we can click this little button here, and I can make that a little bit bigger. We can see here's our policy right now, that on the inbound rule, there's just a bit of XML there to say use cache lookup, vary it by developer. There's a few other options you can use. And there's also storing it for that 10-second duration. But just so you know as well, there's the little show snippets here. So here's a whole lot of other policies you can use to add into your for your operation or for your policy. You can set extra usage quotas by a key. You can validate JWTs. You can play around with cores. There's retries. You can even make do some aggregation, so you can fan out 2 or 3 HTTP calls, and when they come back, you can write some of that crazy XML and C# to get the results and send back one payload. So that's kind of cool. You're inventing a whole API without writing any sort of full web APIs or Azure functions at all. But it does get a little bit tricky, but it is actually really, really useful. So, but for now, I'm going to save the caching policy. And if I go back to Insomnia, click here, we see the first hit goes 1.2 seconds, but now it's going nice and quick, 5, 7, 6, 7, 8, and then we keep trying. I may have missed it already. The times went up 70, 80 milliseconds, and then it goes down again. Cool. But how do we know that's actually hitting the cache or missing the cache? So we can do it in a variety of ways, but one of them is we can do it through here. There's a little test tab here inside of API management. So I can go down and just for the same location, I think I'd put Sydney. And because it's in the portal already, you can see that it's attached to my subscription key. And if I click send, it will make that request. You see we got a 200 response back with the payload. Cool, that's what we expect. Look at trace, that was 1 millisecond. And if we scroll down all the sort of trace information, there's a huge amount of information in here. But we keep going down, and we can see it took care of cores. And what else have we got? Keep going. It's here somewhere, or in the request. This was sent in full, so I don't think it cached it for us at all. Unless, let me just make sure I'm using the right policy, so the right operation. Which one did? Oh, today's forecast. Sorry, I was using the wrong one. I need to use today's forecast. All right, let's go and do that again. Sydney, there we go. So I'm going to send that. So just looking at the trace here, very nice and quick. I might just send that again and again. Cool. So if we scroll down, what I'm looking for is the cache lookup. So it's using the cache, and we can say that this resulted in a cache hit. It's really cool. So if I send that again, 10 seconds has passed, hopefully, wasn't counting. Let's see, this resulted in a cache miss. So that's cool. So we know that the caching is actually working. And if we go back to our analytics page, we can actually see those numbers reflected there as well, which is really nice. In fact, maybe I'll show you that real quickly. So we can close this, and I went back too far. So if I go back to my analytics and put in the last 15 minutes, you can scroll down, and it hasn't quite shown up yet. Can I do a refresh? All right, hasn't made its way through here yet, so it might be a little bit delayed, but we'll be able to see our cache hits and misses in here fairly clearly. Maybe try the last hour. There we go. Maybe I went back a bit too soon. Yeah, so we can have 4 cache misses, 32 cache hits, and that sort of makes, makes us very happy that our caching is doing its job. And you can see all the total requests and everything else. Same with the operations here. I think we can see here the amount of data. Let me just pick the right list. So here, today's forecast is the top one. We made a number of requests to it already. Average response times, all very useful. Cool. Now, let's do something a little bit more serious. So that Azure Functions API that I had, right? So I go back to that one. I can go and I can hit it. It still works. So if somehow someone found out the public URL or IP address of my Azure function, it can still hit it. I don't want that to happen. I actually want to wrap this up in authentication, but if you may know that trying to write or add a some sort of authentication to an Azure Functions app code-wise is quite hard. You have to do it yourself. There's no middleware like ASP.NET Core that will help you with this. So what we can do is make use of the Azure Managed Identities. So when we go firstly in our API management instance, we just make sure that managed or system assigned identity is turned on. And then you can go back to our Azure function. We have to do the same thing here. So generally I have this turned on anyways because it works well with Key Vault and everything. That's sort of the role-based access control is nice and useful. So just make sure that it's turned on here as well. If it's off, you turn it on, it happens very, very quickly. Then you'll notice there's the authentication tabs here in your Azure Functions apps. So I'm going to go with the classic one. We found a small issue with the modern one. It's released not long ago. The difference is that Classic still works through the Azure Active Directory ADAL library, and the new one works through MCell. But for some reason, somewhere in the middle with API management, MCell doesn't quite play nicely, so it says you're unauthorized all the time, whereas the classic one still works. So I'm going to turn this on, and I want to make sure that we have our users at least logged in with Azure Active Directory. So this is my Azure API management managed identity, which is in Azure Active Directory. I want to make sure that that is the only authenticated resource that can access my Azure function. So what we then do is once we've selected log in with Azure Active Directory, we can go and configure it. So a bit of a shortcut. I already went and looked up the client ID of my Azure Functions managed identity. So you can do that through the Azure Active Directory tab. You get that value. You get the issuer URL and your audience URL. So you can just plug all those in here and click OK and save. So that will take not very long. And when that's done, you can go back here. So this is hitting that base Azure Web Sites URL for that weather API. I click send, and now it shouldn't work. It should say unauthorized, which it does, which is great. Love it. So, but now what? Now, if I actually go to, I'll go back here. If I try and do that with the one through Azure API Management, you can see in this URL that it actually goes through azure.api, azure-api.net. I'm also getting unauthorized. Even though I turn on these system or managed identities, there's still one piece missing, and that is the a security policy that I need to add. So I'm going to go back to the API management, go to my API, and I can do this for all operations, right? So currently there's nothing in there, so I can hit this little code button, and just for the interest of saving time, I've got one prepared already. Copy this, that in here, paste that in, and let's see if I can make this a little bit nicer to read. So what we're doing is on the inbound policy, there's one called authentication managed identity. And the resource that we want to authenticate against is our weatherless application. And that weatherless app ID that I put in the authentication configuration for the app, that is the one I'm using here. And I've saved that in the named values. I'm referencing that using sort of double handlebars notation, and making sure that the output of that is written to the MSI access token. And then here I'm setting an authorization header for following the bearer token. So I can then use, say, bearer, and I'm adding in that variable that I'm reading with some basic C#. And because my Azure function doesn't really care about that subscription key header, I'm just taking it out. So here, set header, whatever the name of the header that you want. And if it exists, the action to take is delete, just get rid of it. Cool, press save, nice and easy. And if I now go back to my Insomnia, if I hit this now, this is the one trying to hit through Azure API Management, and click send, and the first hit always takes a bit of time, but it's working. So now I'm actually securely accessing that Azure Functions API via API Management. It's all looking very nicely. If I go back to the raw one, there's now no way for me to hit that without being authenticated. I need that bearer token. And cool. So now that API is protected without writing any code. Very, very nice. And then one more thing I'd like to show you is, I'll go back to my developer portal, is reports. So the user that I logged in with, if I go to these reports, I can see exactly what I've done. And this is really nice. As a user, this is very, very useful. I can see all the usages I've made and all the stats associated with the APIs and the subscriptions and things that I've used. It's very, very useful. And yeah, so that's it for the demo. Very, very awesome to use Azure API Management, and very straightforward. So, but a couple of things I have to explain that I found very, very painful. I'm a big fan of DevOps. Everything has to be automated. If I can't automate it, it's get very upset about it. But that is a problem. So big fan of Azure CLI, but there's a few things missing with Azure API Management, and a lot of the operations are currently still in preview. A few are just missing. So you can't, for instance, upload policies, which might be one of the things you do most often, or even creating APIs and all that. But you want to add policies. You just cannot do that currently with the CLI. But the fallback is you can use PowerShell. But of course, you've got to think maybe now you're going to do double work. If you're already using Azure CLI, now you also have to use PowerShell to just get this one thing done. But the PowerShell library or the PowerShell module has pretty much everything you do need, but it's just a little bit different, a bit more verbose than the CLI. But there's another fallback. There's Azure Resource Manager ARM templates, or the new Bicep templates. They just take longer to author and a bit longer to run, but you can definitely do everything you need to get done with ARM or Bicep. It's very, very useful. Now, I wouldn't give the advice lightly of saying just go to the Azure portal and do it by hand, but there are some cases where you might just go there, set it by hand, and it's almost set and forget for a very, very long time. So if the above options really don't suit your needs and you can quickly just do it in the portal, it's okay for now, until all the other problems are solved. Then ultimately you can fall back to the REST API, the API management REST API. But again, it's just a lot more work, but it can let you do absolutely everything. Cool. Now, debugging is the next bit of pain. So when you write those XML policies and write some C# code, code comes with a lot of problems. And if there's a problem, you want to debug it. But for a long, long time, it's just impossible. You're sort of doing trial and error development, which is not the way to go. It doesn't really suit us very much at all. So, but now there's a VS Code extension for API management, which actually lets you do runtime debugging. As a request comes in, you can hit the breakpoints in the XML and in the C#. You can inspect everything and know exactly what's going on and work out a fix. You get IntelliSense for writing your policies, which is really cool. So it'll get you out of the docs for a bit, looking up the syntax. But it's still a little bit buggy, all right? So just your mileage might vary, but it keeps improving over time. So hopefully soon this thing will be rock solid, and your development or debugging experience will be silky smooth. Some final considerations for API management. This might be a deal breaker for some people, is that GraphQL support is a bit limited. There's a lot of requests on the user voice, so if you want to go and add a few more thumbs up to that, hopefully we can get full GraphQL support through API management. That will be super, super cool. And WebSocket support is also now, as of not long ago, only a few weeks ago, is now in preview. So apps that use the new Webhub Sub service or Signal R, for instance, now they'll be able to go through API management, whereas previously you had to sort of take the long way around to make this work. But it's in preview. It's a bit limited, but I can't wait for the full thing to come out. And very importantly is when you look at API management, is make sure you pick the right tier, because you have to pay for it. And there's a whole bunch of features that comes with the different tiers. You've got the consumption tier. It doesn't have a dev portal, so if you need a dev portal, that one's not for you. But you can go all the way through basic, standard, and premium, and the price just keeps going up exponentially. So you can start with about $60 for the dev tier, which has got all the features, basic and standard, most of them, and then premium, which has got a higher request rate, more caching. You can scale up more. You can deploy it directly inside of a VNet for added security. But you have to look at the features you need out of it, because you're definitely going to pay for them. So in summary, the good things about Azure API management is that you can boost the discovery of your APIs and the consumption of it. All that cool documentation in the portal, you will draw people in, and makes your APIs very, very attractive and easy to use. You can go and apply enterprise-wide rules to all of your APIs in one place, without even changing them. So that is a very, very big tick for me. The precise analytics, so we can know exactly what's going on, we can monitor it. We can even then monetize our API and charge clients exactly for what they use. There's no guessing involved at all. We can add more security. Like I showed you, we can secure apps that haven't had any built-in security. We can just wrap them up in some extra security. It's super useful. And no code really required. So now you can go and take control of all your APIs and have a whole lot of fun. So we've also summarized a lot of things for Azure API management into a set of rules. So if you go to our SSW rules page, you can look up the rules there. And this list is going to just keep growing over time as you learn more and more things. We have the SSW Rewards app. If you haven't got this yet, there's a QR code that you can scan to go and download the app, install it on your phone. And for watching this talk, here is a QR code that you can scan and grab some 500 points. And if you have enough, you can win some really cool prizes. Those hot water bottles are pretty cool. It's got a digital readout on the top to tell you how hot your water or your coffee is. And the Xiaomi band's very, very cool. And if you want to give me some feedback on how I can improve my talk, or just to let me know what you thought of it, there's another feedback form, a code for the feedback form you can scan, and let me know. Thank you very much.